Okay, we ready?
Hot.
Mics are hot. Are
can
you
do whatever
recording?
like.
Oh, they have to call in and then you can turn it off.
All set? Okay. Well, good afternoon. We'll call this meeting of the T-BARTA Citizens Advisory Committee to order. Let's go through a roll call. If you would, call the roll, please.
Bob Kenyon,
Here.
Bill Roberts,
Here.
Todd Whitmer, Lynn Gruber White, Josh Frank,
Here.
Richard Bedford, Richard Balcom, Travis Norton,
Here.
Bill Johnson, Rick Richmond, David Goodwin, Karen Moon,
Here.
Sarah Calhoun,
Here.
Brandon Nicholas. That does not give us-
Is that it? Okay.
Sorry.
That's
Miss- I didn't call Miss Reese, I called Miss Carly Reese.
here.
Okay.
See, we're not used to.
It's not gonna be-
So we have 6 present. We need 8 for a quorum, so we do not have a quorum. We have 1 online. I think Brandy's online. Yes,
Randy is virtually here, yes.
she didn't, I didn't hear her respond. when her
Sarah
name was
Calhoun. We have Sarah Calhoun and Brandon.
Okay, good. Well, at this time, I'll accept a motion to allow our virtual participants to participate, even though we,
Can't do it. You have to have a physical.
I'm sorry, we have to have a quorum to do that. Right.
They can participate in the meeting, but we cannot take any action.
Okay.
Or votes on anything.
You're absolutely right. I'm glad they're here. Glad you're all here. So the next item on our agenda is public comment. Is there anyone signed up for public comment or any to be read into the record?
There are no emails, but Christine Acosta, who I think just joined us on Zoom, has asked for public comment. And Christine, I think you're logged in.
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
We can hear you.
Making sure. Wonderful. Thank you.
I'm not
Good
sure.
morning. Well,
Good afternoon, Christine.
good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the T-BARTA Citizens Advisory Committee. My name is Christina Costa. You may recognize me from some of the work I've done in our region to advance active transportation, bicycle friendliness, and micromobility. I'm speaking to you right now as an advocate from nonprofit Walk Bike Tampa, as well as a citizen and local business owner of a social enterprise called Pedal Power Promoters. And Chris, you might also recognize me as one of your on-the-go podcast listeners. Before doing this work, I was with the global conglomerate American Express, and we regularly used a phrase, think globally and act locally. In the context of T-BARTA, globally would mean the 5-county region, while local pertains to every single point of trip origination within the region, like every sidewalk or dirt path, every transit stop, every driveway, neighborhood, you get my point. It's my observation that large mega projects being pursued by T-BARTA are approached only with a global lens and therefore may not garner the degree of support and enthusiasm that they may deserve. I'm encouraging you today to embrace and commit to the act local lens. After all, what good is regional high-speed connectivity if a person cannot safely access the system without a car? Given this region's notorious poor infrastructure and lack of safety for people walking and biking, T-BARTA can strive with partners to create access to regional systems that are not only safe and friendly, but also let's reach for delightful. Imagine trails and sidewalks that are delivering a person, say, to the BRT system via a shady tree canopy and with drinking fountains, and in some spaces, people-centered commercial space. This can be realized, of course, I'm describing transportation-oriented development, but I also ask you to consider this as TOD trail-oriented development. In a former life, TBARTA did serve as a steward and consolidator of active transportation facilities, specifically shared use non-motorized trails in the 5-county region. And this was an enormously helpful function for TBARTA to provide, because it ensured that all of your local transportation partners had an eye on regional connectivity. In a few minutes, you're going to hear a presentation from Marlin Engineering about non-motorized counting. And I have no doubt that you are going to be amazed and inspired by this information. I thank you for the opportunity to have a few words with you this afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you, Christine, and I hope you'll stay tuned in for the balance of the meeting. Is there any other comment or anything else?
That concludes public comment.
All right. That will conclude our public comment portion of the meeting. The next item on our agenda would be the approval of the April minutes, but not having a quorum, we're going to have to defer that item to the next meeting.
Mr. Chair, if I just may make a comment, I have one correction that I'd like to just make known.
Be happy to have that.
Okay, thank you. On the last page of the April meeting minutes, under items to report to the TBARTA board, I'm sorry, am I still muted or am I unmuted? I'm good. Okay, thank you. There's a comment that I made that states I'm the VP of Bike Walk Tampa Bay. I'm actually the Vice President of Walk Bike Tampa, separate entity. So just like that corrected. Thank you.
Okay. And I would I appreciate that comment. I'm sure we can get those incorporated into the minutes. I would also like to remind the staff of our request a few months ago to record the attendance of the staff in our minutes, so that we have a record of who was attending. If you could start that practice whenever it's convenient, I'd appreciate it. And that moves us on to our presentations. And so we will now hear a micromobility strategic planning project presentation from Elizabeth Stoltz.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
All right, do I need to switch my display, or do you see the full screen?
It's not full yet.
Okay, hold on. How about now?
That's good.
All right, thank you very much for the opportunity to present today. As introduced, I'm Liz Stoltz, and I'm going to talk to you today about a very exciting project in the Tampa Bay area, and that's about the micromobility counting and the strategic planning project. So what we're going to do is a little bit of a review and preliminary findings of the data that we've actually collected. Just so you know who is speaking, I am a national expert really in motorized counting as well as non-motorized counting. I've helped build the statewide Florida Department of Transportation non-motorized traffic monitoring program. And I've also been the Transportation Research Board Traffic Monitoring Committee chair in the past. And I actually created the Bicycle and Pedestrian Data Subcommittee at the TRB level. So I have a lot of counting background, and I'm a subject matter expert in this particular area. The information I'm going to present to you today is really not just me doing a lot of this work, but my colleagues, Jackie Masaki, who also has a PhD in transportation engineering, has done a lot of the data preparation for today's presentation. And Harold Pantaleon has also done a lot of work in the field to make sure that we get the data collected. So I want to make sure to give recognition to them as well. So today I'm going to really give you a presentation that is all about why should we count at all. I'm going to try to do that through giving you 6 reasons. There are many more we could discuss, but for a 20-minute presentation, I've narrowed it to the top 6 reasons. I'm going to give you examples and data findings through national examples, Florida State DOT examples, and then I'm going to talk very specifically with some examples in the Tampa Bay area. So the context of the data I'm going to show you is really this. Micromobility counting is not being done like it should be in motorized traffic counting. So we've been counting cars since the early 1950s, but we're not doing the bicycle and pedestrian counting that we need to be doing. If somebody asked me, why should we count? And I only had that elevator pitch 3 or 4 floors, I would say it's all the same reasons as every other mode, because what gets measured gets done. If you're not counted, you don't count. The last point I want to make before showing you some of the data is that this is only a subset. We have a lot of data, and I'm only presenting a couple of findings from a few sites, but we can dig deeper within these data sets. So if this is intriguing to you and you want to know more, you're just getting today an introductory highlighted set of data that will be presented. Please contact me. I'll have my contact information at the end of the presentation. So how do we get to this point where we're even presenting data is because of the Tampa Downtown Partnership. Karen Kress hired Marlin Engineering to do a strategic plan to look at the region and how can we get data for bicycle and pedestrian volumes. And really we were hired in August of 2021. And we developed this strategic plan, and you can see the outline of how this report ended up getting published in September of 2021. While the Tampa Downtown Partnership got this started in the Tampa downtown area, the goal really is to be a regional program, which means there needs to be more partners, more funding, more regional micromobility training, repository, software, access to the data, and the integration of counts between many different agencies. That's why we're here talking today to TBARDA. And you can see a list specifically of the partners that have been involved in the early stages of developing this regional micromobility traffic counting program. There's always room for more partners, and there's always room for more help in the Tampa Bay area. So if you are with an agency and want to help, want to do counting, want to know more about counting micromobility traffic volumes, and you're interested, again, at the end of the presentation, you'll have my contact information. You can also reach out to Karen Kress, and you can also reach out to Christina Costa or Wade Reynolds, who also have been very involved in the site selection activities of this project. Here are the sites that we've actually collected data from. And the reason why we were able to collect this data is because we partnered with the state DOT program. We have a focus on the Tampa Bay area because the state let us borrow the equipment to do all of this counting. We have 11 sites that we set infrared and tube counters at, and then we had 3 sites we set counters up at. So we had a total of 13 sites, and you live in Tampa, so you'll recognize some of the Tampa Bay area. So you'll recognize these sites here that we collected data from. So let's start out with number 1 reason that we want to count, and it's one of the most important reasons, and that's safety. Without having volume data, we don't know how many travelers there are. And we have to guess. That means we also cannot calculate accurate statistics for crash rates. We don't know how many people are traveling. We need that denominator in order to calculate the statistics and get that clarity in crash impact studies. Also, I picked one statistic that really says it all, and that is it's dangerous really not to count. There is 46,149 pedestrians that were killed in the United States between 2005 and 2014. That's an average of 13 people per day. If we don't even know how many people are using the facility, we cannot really even accurately say if we're making any impacts in safety at all. I'm going to give you a national example here of why it's dangerous not to count in Durango, Colorado. If you'll notice that the bridge that's going over the river here leads to where the picture shows us setting up a counter. And in the middle, you'll see there's a concrete path with a drainage box on the left-hand side that's concrete and a concrete wall on the right side that leads to the path that you see the picture on the right-hand side. We were able to get some counts and we were asked for some counts. In this particular case, we kept getting peak volumes at 2 a.m. in the morning. We thought for sure something is wrong with the counter. But it turns out after I called the local traffic engineer and I said, you know, we keep getting these counts, it turns out to be extremely accurate. If you'll look at the map in the right-hand corner there, you'll see that Main Street is on the left-hand side there, and the college campus is somewhat on the right-hand side where you have to go over the bridge. And at 2 a.m., when all the bars close on Main Street, college kids are going back up to campus. So you can imagine with no lighting in this particular area, how dangerous this could be if you're on a bicycle, maybe not so sober, and you're trying to find your way to the path. What these counts did is effectuate change in a way that they're going to add some lighting and some safety features in this particular national example. Here's some other really statewide examples. As we were doing Florida DOT's program, site selection activities virtually, we simply go to Google and very easily see all sorts of safety concerns. You can see all the red arrows pointing out pedestrians and one cyclist that are unable to get across the facility, or, you know, these are a lot of just really a lot of concerns. And so it's very easy to find examples of where safety is a problem, and we need to have a total volume of people that we know want to use the facility. Sometimes when counting, we also learn all sorts of things about safety that we didn't anticipate. And this is an example. If you look at the video as it goes, here's a transit facility where we drop off a kiss and ride, typically where they designed it such that everyone would stay on the right-hand side. However, you see a number of people going across, and this is a very high-speed facility, and these pedestrians are just really not accommodated for. If you'll notice this is during the day. Now, we were doing counting, not expecting to have video that would help in safety improvements here. You can imagine what this same site might be like at night. If you'll notice, there's a pedestrian using their cell phone at night at the same location, making it even more of a safety concern, trying to get across the facility without being accommodated. So this shows you why we really need some of this counting technology to show where some of the safety issues are. Once we post-process this data, this is what it looks like. All the yellow lines are the trajectory of pedestrians, and all of the red lines are bicyclists. You can see there's quite a bit of activity attempting to go across. And the reason why this is really nice to see is in a 24-hour period, it really illustrates when you see this graphically and visually, where if you were standing outside and watching this facility for 1 hour, you would not have maybe the same picture overlaying every single person within a 24-hour period. So we really need to do 24-hour counting to see what's really going on at the facility. Here's another example, might not be as unsafe, but we still have crossings here. And you see most people at this particular facility are using the sidewalk. That's also good to know. At Marlin Engineering, we created this proprietary way of reporting the data so that it's easily understood. There's a lot going on and it can get really complicated with a lot of numbers and a lot of statistics. So this is a visual way of seeing one side of the sidewalk. What are the volumes in each direction? What are the volumes on the other sidewalk? How many mid-block crossings are we having? And how many cycles on the roadway we have in one direction and another. Here's another example of putting out counting camera equipment where you notice the gentleman put a bicycle on the bus there. I'm going to point that out again in just a second. You'll also notice people crossing here, which is also a very big safety concern. And as we move on and we look at the post-process data, this is what we begin to see. You see all the yellow lines again are the trajectory, and we have quite a lot of people going across this facility. There's also, you see where the bicycle, very well-tracked bicycle went on the bus, and you see it in red here. So that didn't go all the way across. So we know that the camera data works well. We know the post-processing works well. What you're seeing from this image is the different zones where we can count pedestrians and bicyclists. Now I want to give you a very specific Tampa example. We set up a camera outside the Tampa General Hospital. And every time I do this, I learn things. And one of the things I learned is we can do things like that were unanticipated. We wanted a total volume from this particular site, but we were also able to get the data for people going to and from the hospital. So that was kind of exciting, new finding that we could get a count from to and from the hospital. The other thing you're seeing here is this is a facility that carries almost 20,000 annual average daily traffic, which means that's the number of cars in any given 24-hour period, plus or minus 10% on any given day of the calendar year. There are 1,200 micromobility travelers also on this facility. That's pretty much 6% of the total volume of the site. We can break it down also, as you see from this, to annual daily traffic numbers, which are the south sidewalk, the north sidewalk, and so on and so forth. When you look at that all together, it comes out to 1,200, but you can see percentage-wise, we might want to know which sidewalk is carrying the most volume, and we can tell you that. Over 50% of the travelers at this particular location are on the north sidewalk. The other really interesting finding was that we have more travelers to and from the hospital on a Saturday than we do on a Wednesday. That was unanticipated from my point of view, but I don't run hospital operations, so maybe it makes complete sense with shift changes and more people coming and going to the hospital. The other thing I will point out is that 72% of all of the micromobility traffic is actually using the sidewalk. The others might be cyclists that are on the roadway. So all sorts of interesting statistics. Here's another site that we did collect data from a camera on the Platt Street Bridge. And you see, wow, a lot of activity of crossings here. We had 21,000 cars going in one direction on this facility. I'm going to use this as an example later, again in the presentation, so you can remember this visual here. We also have quite a lot of micromobility travelers at 3,000. That accounts for 15% of the total volume at this facility is micromobility. So pretty amazing volumes at this site. What's the second reason we want to count? We want really more efficient operations. if we're not setting our signal timing so that we have adequate green time, people might not make it all the way across the facility. And so you see these two examples here and a graph just showing the green time. We want to increase that time when we know when the peak hour is. We won't know that unless we count. We also want to be able to reroute when construction is happening and when event planning is happening. And when we did our virtual site visits, you can see easily on Google, we could see examples of this. We want to be able to increase our green time at really high traffic volume, motorized traffic volume sites, as well as the construction where you see we were able to capture a picture of cyclists during a construction event here. Also, sharrows and intersections really require this information from operations. Again, we want to increase green time to get people to and from and across facilities. Very locally, we collect the data on 2 bridges. We might want to know the peak hour volumes. When we start to look at the very specifics of this data, you can see on a Thursday, the peak hour at the Laurel Street Bridge is around 5 or 6 o'clock. That has a pattern consistent with commuter. And on a Saturday, the peak is at noon or 1 o'clock. So we definitely have the ability to tell you for signal timing or bridge timing or lots of reasons why you might want this information. Here is an example of operational accommodation. I gave this same presentation a couple of weeks ago, and the traffic engineer in the audience told me, and I had these 2 pictures separated on 2 different slides. But what he did was he put them together in his mind, and he said, the Tampa Riverwalk basically is accommodating the travelers, which anything over 1,000 ADT, 1,000 travelers per day, that's a high volume site and really needs accommodations. And so at the Tampa Riverwalk, we have a 16-foot wide facility that can accommodate this. You can imagine if there was debris or water, that would then start impeding upon that 16 feet. If you look at the Tampa General Hospital site, you see we have 2 sidewalks. And at best, on those 2 sidewalks, we have 6 feet to accommodate the pedestrians and some of the cyclists. And even in the middle of the slide, if you look, there's actually only 4 feet at one of the pinch points. So this just goes to show you that we need to have these numbers to really make informed decisions about accommodating bicycle and pedestrian travel. Reason number 3, maintenance. Although you're seeing snow here, you also see a street sweeper. And I just want to tell you one story about how maintenance in Colorado made a big difference. We put up the first counter on the E470 trail that goes around Denver. And the reason we put that counter up is because they did not plow that facility. And I asked the maintenance folks why they didn't do that. And they said, well, we don't have any travelers on there. And I said, well, what if we just plow at one time? We do a study, you plow at one time, we count, you don't plow at another time, we count. Turns out over 100 people use this facility when it's plowed versus when it's not plowed. And that effectuated change in maintenance schedules. And now what happens at that facility, 48 hours after the last snowflake, they now have a contractor that actually plows this facility. So now it's really an operational facility. You can picture now if we have sand problems in Florida or water problems in Florida, you can see the Fort Lauderdale example, and then you can see on the left-hand side, we've got a drainage issue. And on the right-hand side, you can see this is actually a bike lane. I was out on site and took this picture with a cyclist who's forced to use the sidewalk instead of the bike lane. Then we have other examples of where we've counted, where we want to make sure that water and debris are not on the Tampa River Walk to impede all of the volume that we have to accommodate there. And we also have the Courtney Campbell site where we collected data as well. Reason number 4, performance. Here's an example of a trail that was developed in Kansas City by 2 different builders, and they didn't connect the housing additions. So there was no expectation that this facility would be a commuter operational facility for bicycle and pedestrian travel until data was collected. And why is this so important? To show a morning peak, an afternoon peak, and an evening peak is traditional commute travel, is because now that this facility can be called a commute facility, they're eligible for transportation funds. And so what happened was now they can ask for funding to connect these 2 trails together. So there's all sorts of unexpected reasons to use this data that really helps extend and narrow the gaps between our system. Here's another very specific example of performance in the Tampa Bay area. The Selman Greenway turns out extremely low volumes, and so low that it even is lower from 2021 to 2022. So this just gives us opportunity to do other things like put in wayfinding, which other studies have shown are needed. Reason number 5, economic development and new funding options. With this data, the Colorado DOT Bicycle and Pedestrian Coordinator is not allowing or approving any grant funding for congestion mitigation and air quality grants with performance measures that claim to make an increase or a decrease in traffic unless a counter is put in place to prove that there actually is an increase or a decrease in traffic. So we can add this to our operations. We can add this as an integrated part of our program development and all sorts of economic development reasons. Businesses want to target marketing efforts towards either commuters or recreational travelers. They want to know where the highest volumes are, and they want to understand changes in volume. At your Franklin site where there's a theater, and you can see this is one of the most visually impactful camera counting technology pictures that I've ever seen, actually. So, and what's even more amazing about this site is that we have 2,229 motorists that travel on this facility, but we have actually more micro mobility travelers at this site. I have never seen that before. That's pretty amazing. Not to say that that is always going to be the case, but you want to know this kind of information so you can make all sorts of planning decisions for what goes on in this corridor. And again, if we look at all the traffic volumes where we collected data, you can look at this visually and just see the top 3 sites, the Riverwalk, the Franklin site, and the Platt Street Bridge. And then you have a couple of other really high volumes, or maybe you're looking for the low volume sites to see where to make an impact. Last reason you want to count is really to understand these traffic patterns. I kind of touched on this throughout the presentation. If you look at this example again from the Platt Street, you can see clearly a commute pattern in the data on a Wednesday, and then a clear recreational pattern on a Saturday. I'm going to close it out with just saying we really do need more partners. I gave you examples of how we're partnering with the Florida DOT to get these counts in the first place, but there are other opportunities in getting grants, whether it's people that have done things in the past, like a Kaiser Permanente grant or a CDC grant Pinellas County is a great example. They just got 8 more counters funded, continuous counters that they're going to put in place. So I'll finish up with this example of how to expand the program. Is also another example in Florida, in Miami, where the hospital, Baptist Hospital, funded a continuous counter, gave $13,000 to put a counter on the facility that goes to their hospital. And there are plans to fund a second counter. And a running company in Jacksonville, Florida, gave money to put up this display counter that counts everyone that goes past this facility. $31,000 grant here given by the JTC running company.
Yes.
And then there's also all sorts of national examples. Washington, D.C. and Long Beach also have done some of that kind of work. I'm going to close with the recommendations of let's get a counter in the Riverwalk location, get it funded. Let's continue to expand these data partnerships. Let's get some more equipment, do some counting. We need to get some software so that we can give everyone access to this data. We want to purchase some mobile counters and some counting technology. And in summary, if you're counting motorized traffic, you should be counting micro mobility traffic, because if you don't count, you're not counted. And then you see the 6 reasons here again. And that is what I have to say today. I don't know if you want me to take questions or just close here.
No, I think that was a great presentation, a lot of good information there. Are there questions from the committee? Anyone have specific questions of Liz? Josh?
Yes, thank you. I just, wanted to repeat, I'm the gentleman who was able to put the 2 and 2 together.
Yay.
Bridge. I won't hold that you called me a traffic engineer against me.
Okay, sorry.
That's okay. I just want to say every time I see this, I'm amazed, and I think it's incredibly insightful and powerful data that I think gets missed in pretty much every planning, design project, and the decision making to put projects in higher priority or lower priority. I think not having this information is just a major disservice, not just locally for projects, but regionally. And I would hope that this is something that seems to be a relatively low hanging fruit for boards just like ours and the full T-BARTA board to do something regionally that could set us apart and start to make an impact in our statistics and reputation for being a national leader for bike and pedestrian fatalities. So I would just encourage the rest of you here to, decipher this information, absorb it. And I hope you're as excited at seeing some of this as I am, and keep an open mind about how we can potentially help projects like this in the future or find other sources for it. So that's all. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Josh. Yes, Bob Henyon?
Yeah, and the cost is very low, very, very low.
Yeah. I would like to ask Liz, is the Riverwalk counting process a short-term, or is that an ongoing project, or is that what you're looking for, is an ongoing project?
Yeah, so we did short-term counts. Everything I presented today was from short-term. The goal is to put something continuous there, and that's really what the ask is, to get some funding to put a continuous counter there so that we have data all throughout the year, every hour of every calendar year. So yes, that's the goal in the future.
And do you have a cost associated with that, or is that something yet to be developed, or where?
Yeah, that's a great question. I know we've gotten some estimates, and I'll just give you the roundabout figures, around $30,000 per display board site, but you don't have to put a display board at every site that you want to count. So.
Okay. Other questions from the committee? Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, Bill, thank you. wanted to know whether it was a full year of data or not, if it was just a short term. We'd like to see the full year data. My question is to the administrative staff here, would this qualify for transit? That's our business now.
Can I just say that we've done some counting around transit facilities, which is why I tried to pull those examples for you, and that we have been funded, at least from Florida DOT, doing a study around transit facilities using transit funding. So I know it is possible. We need some champions that have funding. So if that's helpful.
Liz, if I can add here, we did a specific study actually for safe access to transit facilities. And at that time, when we did the study, we didn't have the NMTM data or the bike ped data. So we fell short. And after the DOT realized that we are doing the count program for another office, we did a kind of an integrated study. And I think some slides were shown from that in Liz's presentation, but we have a detailed presentation centered around transit agencies. Thank you.
Good. And can I assume that was Harold speaking to identify?
Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, that was Chris Francis from Marlin Engineering.
Oh.
This is Christina Costa. I would like to also share with you all that in anticipation of your transit-related question, I did inquire on the crash data that is collected presently. I reached out only to the Hillsborough TPO, so I don't know the answer for this in other areas. But despite our knowledge in the advocacy community that many crashes and serious crashes and fatalities happen with transit users, it is not presently a data point that is captured in crash data in Hillsborough County, but it is a data point that is recognized as very, very important that we should try to capture it in the future.
Follow-up,
Thank
Bill?
you, Christy. Yes, go ahead.
I'd like to see if you're asking for funds, or can we do a grant that's specific to the transit areas that we're going to have in place? Is that something we can discuss? I mean, I don't want to nix this. This is a wonderful idea, but we need to also look at our funding and how we're focused by mandate on transit. So we need to make it so that it works in the transit field.
Brian, you care to answer that for?
Yeah, because I think really what the question is, what role, if any, does TBARTA have with helping to promote this? And I guess maybe a question I would put to Elizabeth is, and I'm not trying to pass the buck, but I want to ask, have you given this presentation or reached out to the Suncoast Transportation Planning Alliance, which is basically, it's the MPOs, the collective MPOs for the Tampa Bay area?
So in quick answer is no, I have not given this presentation yet, but I'd be happy to do that.
Because on the way, I mean, with TBARTA, I mean, two things to keep in mind. We are a transit agency and not we are a regional transit agency. And I'm not trying to shoot down the idea offhand and just be Dr. No. I guess what my answer to your question is, if you're asking, well, what role does TBARTA have? I think it comes down to, well, what's the ask? If the goal is to try and expand this type of micromobility counting on a regional scale, I think my initial response would be, what interest would the Suncoast Transportation Planning Alliance have in this? And would there possibly be a role for TBARTA in partnering with the Suncoast Transportation Planning Alliance? I don't necessarily see TBARTA, off the top of my head, my initial reaction is I don't see how TBARTA would possibly be the lead agency on something like this. That's not to say, though, that we couldn't partner with a group like the Suncoast Transportation Planning Alliance and perhaps put in some money to help with the promotion. So,
Well, I have one more follow-up.
You may.
And I like the way this is going. This will affect not only residents and shareholders in our area, but also tourism. Is there a way to reach out to Tampa Bay, visit Tampa Bay? I know Travis is with St. Pete. Okay, and other chambers of commerce that might want to jump on this, because this is, we're getting people safely to areas that tourists travel. Riverwalk specifically has become a mecca for tourist dollars. So those may be big buy-ins. So just, that's all I got. Thanks.
Other questions? Josh?
Yeah, I just, I really appreciate all the feedback in the comments, especially from staff and from other board members. I brought this forward because I think there is some way that T-BARTA can serve some way to, or some function to help this, whether it's through a partnership, it doesn't necessarily have to own it. But I do think, two things. One is that for a board and an agency that sometimes, if not oftentimes, has issues justifying its existence to the state and to the citizenry, and also struggles with getting awareness and marketing out for our efforts and endeavors. I think having something as visual as counters with our logo on them is something that could be really powerful, especially if folks are able to engage with them regionally. I think that's a great idea to have, one per county or several per county or whatever it takes to really begin to think of T-BARTA and its role with transit. And I think the other side of that coin is this isn't a criticism, but I do think that thinking of transit as being only things with wheels, fixed wheels and rails, is a very limited mindset. And I'm not saying you said that. I'm just saying, I think we should challenge ourselves to think about transit more broadly. And I think that includes micromobility. And even if we were to consider and take a more defined definition of, transit as things including stops and infrastructure of a higher magnitude, we still got to get people to those stops. And that's a huge part of transit. So I would say that, my first comment was to keep an open mind. I think I'm happy to hear some of the comments because I think we do have an open mind. And I would hope that whether it's through the Suncoast Planning, or as a partner with somebody else, I think that there is a very valid reason for us to be involved. So that's all.
Thank you, Josh.
One more jump off of that, and I apologize. Like I said, if there's a way that we can swing in with FTA, get them on board with these micro mobilities, I think we would have a chance to really sink our teeth into this. And I'd like to see us pursue that if that's something somebody here would like to do.
Good comments.
I thought I would just add to that
Identify yourself for the record.
the commuter assistance program might be able to, in the future, work on a programs like this. It really falls within the commuter assistance program's ballpark to examine this and look closely at how we move people safely from one point to another. And that includes accessing transit facilities that will eventually be built. But with that said, I don't see a source of funding for us right at the moment, but it's something that we can reach out to our partners and see if we can't access funding for a project like this. I just wanted to throw that out there.
Good, thank you. And Liz, I would add only one more comment from me, and that is that we have a statewide program to create a network of trails, which are intended to be used for bicyclists and pedestrians. This might be an appropriate mechanism to document the current use of those trails where they exist in order to seek more funding to expand them. So I would I'm not sure that's a T-BARTA project, but it certainly is a regional project within the Tampa Bay area. So I thank you for coming and making the presentation. And Christine, thank you for encouraging us to give some thought to this.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Yes. Oh, Bob, go ahead. My opinion.
Going along with what Karen's been saying before, and Josh has been saying, I think it's very important that we pursue these things. The micromobility is very, very important. But we have to remember and keep on track the fact that we are Tampa Transit. Abandon setting mass transit goals and get distracted only into transportation.
Hey, this is Chris Francis from Marlin Engineering. If I can just add to what just now the speaker said is, we recently completed a study with NCHRP on mobility as a service. And I think this data set adds value to it from the context of multimodal mobility, including transit. And we have actually come out with some recommendations. We used a very data-intensive kind of analysis tool that brings in transit app data into focus. So yeah, I mean, it's not just the only data set, as Liz said, but it adds value to enhance the mobility across all modes. Thank you.
Good. Thank you for that comment. Anything else on this topic? Again, Liz, thank you and your crew for coming and joining us today. The next item on our agenda is an RRT presentation, investing on electric vehicle analysis. Brian, you going to do this one?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. At the April board meeting, Scott Pringle gave part 2 of a presentation on the topic of electric vehicles as it relates to the RRT, and basically what the impacts would be of going fully electric, on the fleet size and on the capital cost. So I'm going to give you the presentation that Scott gave at the April board meeting. Okay, there you go. As always, we show what the purpose is of the RRT. The purpose of the RRT is to provide all-day modern mobility that provides quick, safe, reliable, frequent, and of course, regional rapid service. Back in August, the board adopted the locally preferred alternative, the LPA, which has dedicated freeway BRT lanes in Hillsborough. I realize that part is controversial. Nevertheless, that is in the LPA. Dedicated BRT lanes in Hillsborough, north of downtown Tampa, in Pasco and in Pinellas. Express lanes across the Howard Franklin Bridge. In mixed traffic between West Shore and Tampa, with a significant investment in the stations and community access to stations. More specifically, what WSP did was they looked into, in regards to the topic of electric vehicles, how many additional vehicles would we need if we went fully electric? Where would we place the charging infrastructure? What would be the capital costs? And finally, what would be the environmental benefits? So now it's a pretty exciting time to be talking about electric buses. Sales of battery electric buses were up 27% from 2021 to now. I was not at the APTA Bus Expo in Orlando last fall, but from what I heard at that expo, all of the buses that were on display there were all battery electric buses with the exception of one CNG vehicle. In other words, there were no diesel buses on display at the expo. So this does seem to be the direction that the market is heading. There are options right now for vehicles today. The charging equipment is not standardized yet. So the type of chargers that you would get today would be specific to that model bus. There's no standard charger. The battery range on the buses is still not you still do not get as much range on a battery electric bus as a diesel. However, the technology is improving every year. On the other hand, the business intelligence tools that come with battery electric buses are pretty robust. Apparently, I guess with battery electric buses comes these data analysis tools that will show you in real time how the battery is performing. It'll even show you how the bus driver is performing. The next few slides you saw in the presentation last time. This is a chart that shows the trends in vehicle technologies. The bar that is in dark yellow, that is diesel. And what you can see is over time, the percentage of diesel buses across the nation has been steadily decreasing. You don't see a specific category yet for battery electric. Those are listed under the category of other. And the reason is they're still a pretty small part of the overall market share. WSP has a modeling tool called BOLT that estimates the outcomes of going fully electric. So it takes into consideration a lot of inputs, such as the route structure, your fleet size, passenger load, the climate and topography, and your service span. And then it will give you an estimate of what your charging needs would be, what the capital and operating costs would be. This is just another slide that elaborates what went into their analysis, the things that were taken into consideration. The table at the bottom shows the costs that were assumed for the two different types of chargers. So you can have a charger at the maintenance depot, and right now you're looking at about $120,000 to $260,000 per depot charger. You can also do on-route charging, and there's a much broader range there. You're looking at $180,000 to $590,000 for on-route charging per unit. The two types of vehicles that WSP looked at in the analysis was the New Flyer and Proterra vehicles. The reason why they did that, well, two reasons really. Both of these models can be purchased off the Florida statewide contract today. And the other reason is both of these types of vehicles allow for on-route charging. In the analysis that they did, they assumed that each of the buses would start the day at 100% charge. So they would be fully charged when they leave the garage. But like I said before, there are a lot of different variables that will impact the performance of the bus during the day, such as the climate and the topography. The first thing WSP did was they did a test of a 1-for-1 swap of the 22 diesel hybrid buses that were assumed in the LPA. In other words, they looked at, could we operate the regional rapid transit with the same number of vehicles? And the short answer is no. With most of the blocks, and when I say block, a block is a portion of the route schedule that is assigned to a vehicle. For most of the blocks, the bus was not able to complete that block of service on a single charge. So, and that is what the pie charts on the right are showing. The amount of kilowatts consumed is shown in yellow, and the amount of kilowatts that you would still need to perform the service is shown in blue. And so there's a range, because like I said, they looked at this data on the scale of individual blocks of service. In order to operate the RRT, we would have to increase the size of the fleet by 14 vehicles. So from 22 to 36. Route charging and schedule adjustments could help reduce the additional vehicle requirement. However, WSP is not recommending we make changes to the schedule, because then you introduce new problems. You know, you solve one problem, but you create a new one. Like specifically, you would have to reduce the frequency of the service. So with that in mind, let's take a look at what on-route charging will do for you. If we did on-route charging with the existing schedule that's proposed in the LPA, we could reduce the additional bus requirement by 7 vehicles. So in other words, we would need a fleet size of 29 vehicles instead of 36. Now, keep in mind, that's based on the current state of the technology. Like I said, batteries are constantly improving. The speed of charging is getting better. And remember, we're not looking at starting the RRT until around 2030. So I think it's safe to say that over the next 8 years, you're going to see significant improvements in battery technology. With the on-route charging solution, WSP is recommending a total of 11 on-route chargers at the locations you see here on the chart. Some of the locations have 2 chargers. That's because we don't want to have a bus waiting for another bus to finish charging. Without on-route charging, we're looking at an additional $25 to $34 million in project costs on the capital side. With the on-route charging, it's an additional 19 to 30 million. So this slide is just a quick reminder of where we are with the LPA. So we were at about $150 million on the capital costs, and that was assuming diesel hybrids. If we switch to fully electric, we would go from 150 million to approximately 183 million if we did it without on-route charging, or 180 million if we did with on-route charging. I want to talk briefly about the environmental benefits that would come from going fully electric, because environmental benefits, that is one of the things Federal Transit Administration takes into consideration when you apply for a capital investment grant. And WSP estimates that if we were to go fully electric, we would see about $680,000 annually in environmental benefits of going fully electric. So that would be a plus in our corner on our application if we were to go fully electric. So in summary, if we want to go fully electric, it comes down to whether we want to do it with or without on-route charging. If we do it without on-route charging, we would be looking at 14 additional vehicles. If we were to do it with on-route charging, it would be 7 additional vehicles. The good news is we don't have to make that decision today. Like I said, we're looking at starting operations around 2030. The technology is rapidly evolving. By the time we get to the point of starting this project, I think we'll be in a much better situation. It's expected that by 2030, electric vehicles will be the prominent vehicle type in the transit market. We did not have a quorum when Scott presented this at the board meeting. I mean, it was an information item anyway, but there was no official vote taken on this. But I will say there seemed to be general support for continuing to have this conversation about going fully electric with the RRT. So, and that concludes my presentation. I'll try to answer any questions you have. I'll be the first to admit I am not an electric bus expert. I am basically here regurgitating what Scott gave last month. So.
Thank you, Brian, for doing that and walking us through it. Questions from the committee? Comments? Do you have a sense of when the decision will need to be made on what type of vehicle to purchase? Is that?
We're looking at wrapping up the study at the end of the calendar year. And I would think by then we need to have some sort of consensus. I mean, I don't think when we wrap up this study, we're going to be asking for direction from the board on when do they think we want to apply for entry into the capital investment grant program, because it's likely that there's going to be a bit of a time gap between when the study ends and when we actually request entry into the CIG program. And so we'll have to make that decision before that point. Are we going fully electric or not?
Okay. All right. Any other questions? Karen?
I have a question.
Yes.
All right, so if we do go with charging stations at transit hubs, are we gonna end the route at that point? Is it possible to have folks continue on a different bus? So let's say we're going from Chapacana Field to West Shore, and the bus needs to be charged. Will there be a way to move folks from one bus to the next, or are we going to chop off
No, I believe the plan is that when it pulls into some of these stations, it would probably just maybe charge for a few minutes and basically just, for lack of a better term, add enough juice into it just to get it going a little bit further the way. Maybe when it gets to the end of the line, it might have a layover
Right.
of a few minutes before it has to go back the other direction. I would think at the end of the line is probably where the bus is going to be able to stay stationary the longest during the layovers. But at these stations that are like in the middle of the route, like say like in West Shore or USF area, it may only be able to get like a 1 minute charge before it has to get back on the road.
My concern is as the batteries age, we're going to lose, usage hours, miles. And it might be beneficial for us to foresee we may have to transfer people from one bus to the
Right.
next as it ages, as the system ages.
I will say this, we're very lucky in that PSTA is kind of taking the lead here in this area, and they're learning quite a bit about battery bus operations, and that's information that we'll be able to use to our advantage when it comes time to operate the RRT. All those lessons learned that PSTA has gotten.
I do have one more. Are there any buses that are going to utilize onboard solar? I mean, I know right now the solar panels can't pull enough to keep the bus running, but it might be advantageous if we're running short or,
You're talking about solar panels on the bus itself.
Yeah.
I believe Cliff Manuel, our board chair, asked that very question of WSP at the last meeting. And if I recall, the answer that WSP gave was that at this point right now, that type of technology, it's being experimented with, but it's
Not
nowhere near ready to be marketed.
Right. I know the panels aren't there yet. They're not capable of capturing enough that we need to power a bus at this point. But I hope that we can get there at some point. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Karen. Any other questions? Brian, thanks for the presentation and bringing us up to speed, so to speak. Okay, that concludes our two presentations. The next item of business is new business, and we have a TD Tampa Bay update from Chris.
I'll just give you a brief update on our appropriations. As you know, in the proposed state budget, there are two appropriations, $1 million to resume TD Tampa Bay operations, and I think it's $375,000 for TBARTA agency operations. As of, I think this morning, the governor had not received the budget yet. And some of that has to do with the special sessions that are being planned in Tallahassee as to when he gets those. But we expect him to get it very soon, and then he has 14 days to sign it. Those decisions are already being made. Ron Pierce is in constant conversation with folks up there. And the word is that they want to make sure that TD Tampa Bay is something that's important to the people and want to make sure it's a significant enough project to include in the budget. So in response to that, we of course have a lot of people who used the service last year. And as you know, they have been very passionate about it. And that is really I think a tribute to the work that's been done into that program. It's been proven to be something that a lot of individuals really want. So we've reached out to our database of people who use the service. We let them know, hey, the governor's office, if you've used the service, it certainly can't hurt to send a vote of support if you want this service to return, because they need to hear from you now. And so there are a couple of individuals on the governor's staff who are key to that. And Mr. Chairman, I don't know if you reached out to the CAC as well, but those are the individuals who need to hear that. As you know, that the Tampa Bay Partnership, I think, also wrote a very detailed note in support of both the appropriation for TBARTA as well as TD Tampa Bay. And of course, we need both of those to be included in this budget. We did also hold, and I will share my screen very quickly here. We held a meeting today of a number of TD Tampa Bay users, and this was held at the Tampa office of the Lighthouse for the Blind and Low Vision. A lot of our people in the database got together, and I wanted to brief them on where we stood. I've asked them as well to reach out to the governor's office, and we had a packed house. I said, let's pack the house. Lorena and I were both there. It was actually standing room only. There were people in the back of the room there. We had a very nice turnout of individuals, and many of them told their stories about how much this service has added to the independence in their lives, and they really wanted us to bring it back. So that group of folks is very much engaged as well. We did get some media coverage for that, so you may see something on the television sets a little later today, and certainly as those links are available, I'll make that out there. But I just wanted to brief all of you on what we're doing right now. Now's the time to be heard, especially for those who support TD Tampa Bay, because it's a great example of what we do right now. We have a lot of big transit projects we need to work on to further connect everybody regionally. But as I don't need to remind you, I mean, this is a really great example of the regional connectivity that TBARDA is engaged in and can do right now, service that we can provide right now. And important to note that the reasons that I put in my PowerPoint presentation, employment was the number one reason. 27% of all the trips provided by TD Tampa Bay were for people going to jobs, cross-county for jobs. Medical appointments were number two, I think at about 23%. Education was in there. Social activity made up about 20%. So just like many of us, people are using this service, certainly not for frivolous reasons, just to go, across and go see the beach. There certainly are some social reasons in there as well. There should be. But I think it's important to note, we talk about the reason to make regional connectivity to improve access to jobs and employment and increase the economic vibrancy of our region. Well, TD Tampa Bay is in many ways a microcosm, an example of exactly just that for this very specific population, those who are transportation disadvantaged. So I would just like to encourage everyone out there, if you can, if you want to write to the governor's office, if the email address is supplied. If you have others, I do think that would be something that could be helpful as we get these appropriations across the finish line. And I'm open to any questions you might have.
Good. Questions? Yes, Karen?
Can you tell me whether Francis is female or male?
I don't know. I do not know.
Kind of makes the salutation.
I stand that correct. I believe it is Mr. Francis, because I think I looked at his LinkedIn page. I do believe it is Mr. Francis.
Okay, thank you.
I hope so.
And then the other thing is, can we put together something that we can share in social media, please? I can work.
Sure. There, I've actually put out this picture is posted on Facebook just after noon, so we have some of that, but we can put out a little bit more.
Okay, thank you.
Good. Other questions or comments? Yeah, this is an opportunity for us to do what we've talked about on many occasions in these meetings and reach out to the governor's office if you're so inclined and support both appropriations for TBARDA, the TD program, as well as the $375,000 of operating funds. So happy to do it.
I just wanted to make a quick comment.
Yes.
We had our TD meeting this morning for the Hernando Transportation Disadvantage, and the word must have already gotten out because one of our members has asked for all the members to email, and it's circulating and being posted. So
we want those emails to go viral. I'll tell you, you
Yes.
can't send enough. And even though it's great that, organizations such as the partnership are sending emails, I think it's just the rank and file everyday user saying, I use it and want it. I use it and want it. They want to hear a lot of folks to hear that. I think that would be effective. So thank you.
and the education, I mean, one of the women on our board, she takes classes at Pasco Hernando, and she said it takes her over 2 hours to get there now that she doesn't have the service.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Good project. Good comment. Thank you. The next item on our agenda is the advanced quorum discussion. We don't have a quorum today, so we're not going to take any action on this, but we did talk about it at our last meeting. I think I'm open to any further comments about whether we ought to consider implementing a program where we poll our committee members, get a commitment for a quorum some period of time in advance. And if that quorum is not forthcoming, if we should or should not postpone that meeting. I think the sense of this committee was, at least at the last meeting, to go ahead and not implement that program, but in fact to have our meetings, have our presentations, and allow people the flexibility of coming when they can. And if they can't at the last minute, then they can't simply make it. Are there any new thoughts about that, Bob?
Do we have any information on vacancies that might be contributing to not having a quorum?
I think we're going to have a vacancy report on.
Yeah, I'll be briefing on vacancies later, but just to clarify, when it comes to determining a quorum, the vacancies don't play a role here because the quorum is based on the members, not I guess what I'm saying is the unfilled seats don't get included in the count for a quorum.
Okay.
Yeah, we do have a number of vacant seats. I think we have 14 slots that are filled, which means a quorum of 8 is required for us to take action at a meeting.
But if we fill those ones with people who actually can come, it certainly would help.
That would help. Yeah.
We're missing voices.
I'm sorry, Karen, we're missing.
We're missing voices.
Yeah.
You know, we've heard each other speak, we're sick of each other. We need other people here.
Thank you.
Well, we also have to make sure that we don't start losing counties like Manatee.
Right, and we don't have a Manatee representative, or we didn't for a long time. Okay, let's move on to the next item, which is the commuter services update. Ken Bowden, you're on.
Thank you. I
Just
just want to start off and let you know that we have the Green Your Commute Challenge that is starting up. It'll run between Sunday, May 15th to Saturday, May 21st. It's an opportunity for employers to engage their employees in transportation that maybe they're not normally taking, like riding the bus or carpooling, bike riding. And in order to support that, we're providing one lucky winner a $100 gift certificate or a gift card that will be drawn at random. And each trip that is recorded in the CommuteTampaBay.com website is a chance for a person to win. In addition to that, we're giving away 4 $25 gift cards for those that post their green commute photos on social media. And so we're hoping that we get some good activity on our social media pages, both on Facebook, Instagram, and on Twitter as well. Companies will be competing against one another, basically. So we have 3 different categories. We have small, medium, and large, just to kind of make it so that we're not competing apples against oranges, so to say. And they'll be competing for greatest savings in terms of CO2 emissions, and also the most money saved by employees in terms of fuel costs. In addition to that, we have a Best Workplace for Commuters event coming up on May 26th. We're doing this with Qatar, with the Center for Urban Transportation Research. They run the Best Workplaces for Commuters program. Basically, we're helping with the outreach across our 5-county region and just trying to get information out to businesses about commuter services and the Best Workplace for Commuters designation. And that designation, just so that you know, is when an employer offers a quality benefit, transportation benefit for their employees, that makes them eligible for this particular award. And it gives us the opportunity to work with them and to basically improve the transportation options to their employees at their location. We're going to have like a quick update on our van pools, and would you mind taking?
So just wanted to give you guys a quick update on the van pool deliveries. I'm Arlene DeCaruli, by the way, kind of executive for Commute with Enterprise. So since January, we've actually been able to deliver 16 van pools. I know that we had a meeting not too long ago where we talked about a lot being available in the pipeline. So I've got 20 that I'm actually working with right now. These would be new deliveries, 10 of which are expected to go out this month. And those 10 are all to federal sites. Ken and I actually have been working directly with the James A. Haley, that's one of the larger VA hospitals that supports the program for their employees. And we launched a marketing campaign around February. And that's really where we saw a large increase in folks reaching out to us from the James A. Haley location, especially with conjunction with fuel prices increasing. So 8 of the new deliveries, so about half of the new deliveries since January actually went out to James A. Haley, and that's in March and April. And we've got 10 that will be going out in the next 3 months here and counting. So again, we mentioned we're getting a lot more phone calls over there. Something else that we're doing, we actually met over with the MacDill Air Force Base. They've got a task force that's really prioritizing housing because of the cost increasing. But we discussed transportation, we included that. So with MacDill, we're also working this marketing campaign. We're hoping that it seems busy times is June, July, August for them. We're recruiting more. So we're making it part of the orientation, part of the process of newcomers, right? They know early on that they've got transportation solution. And again, challenges with housing now that they're traveling longer distances to get to work are really affecting them. So Ken and I have been partnering up with them and letting them know that there's options out there.
I should say that that's really kind of an emergency situation right now at MacDill. They have a waiting list of 500 people waiting to get into housing. And those folks currently are renting Airbnbs, renting in hotels. That's where they're staying. So this was really a call by the commander at MacDill Air Force Base to activate the community. And in attendance, we actually had a great representation of Tampa Bay, I should say. We had County Commissioner Kim Overman was present at that meeting. The Tampa Bay Chamber of Commerce, Tampa Chamber of Commerce, Tampa Bay Workforce Alliance, Hillsborough County School District was in attendance as well. And our role really in this was just to let them know about the services that we have and to kind of plug them, the command structure, into the fact that there's 54 van pools already going between the East Bay, where housing is maybe a little more affordable, and MacDill. And basically just to start that conversation about how we can help them expand the pool of housing by giving their service personnel the ability to travel longer distances. I just wanted to mention that. And I also wanted to mention briefly that we had a meeting this morning with the downtown Tampa hotel general managers. We had 8 different hotel managers in attendance, and it gave us an opportunity to not only talk about van pool, but to talk about the kinds of commuter services, plugging their managers into information about how their employees are currently getting to work, what options they would be interested in utilizing, and then starting what we call a zip code party, where we take information about where folks are living and bring folks together, whether it be virtually, in person, or just simple email communications. This, we hope, will go a long ways to defraying the cost for employees that are working in the hospitality industry. And also hopefully reduce the amount of traffic in our downtown locations and improve parking access, both for employees and for the guests visiting downtown. And that's it for us right now. Any questions?
Good. Questions from the committee? Anyone have, how many vans are we up to? I love to have count.
We're at 172. I'd
Come
love
on.
for that number to be higher because we've been able to, like I said, put a lot of deliveries out.
That's great.
Then we did have a few folks that they'll get deployed causing termination. And then a few groups terminated Haley because they retired early. So in fact, I was actually looking at those numbers over the last 3 years. We've had a decent amount of terminations. Past 3 years, about 60. So it looks like the number's still, but I promise I'm putting examples out there. And it seems that that was really majority of causes, deployment and retirement.
Good.
We're finding new groups, so that's good news.
Yeah, good. Congratulations. That's a phenomenal number. Any other questions from the committee? Well, it's a real success story. And Ken, Arlinda, thanks for bringing us that good news. And I hope the effort with the downtown Tampa hospitality managers pays off. Are you doing a similar program in St. Pete, or do you intend to?
Yeah, we were just talking with Karen Kress about that with the DTP. What we'd like to do is we'd like to put something together where it's maybe sponsored by Best Workplaces for Commuters, but with a hospitality theme that then incorporates, you know, folks in Clearwater, in St. Pete. The hospitality industry is just vital for Tampa Bay, and so plugging them into that and letting them know about our services, and I think is really important. I think, you know, we would probably shoot for July or August for something on that scale. We'll hopefully have something to report on that.
Good. Well, we'll look forward to that report then. Good. All right. Well, thank you for bringing that information to the committee. It's always good to hear from you. Yeah, Bill Johnson, join the meeting.
Thank you. I love the report. Have you done anything with the public school system in Pinellas County? It seems like that might be a possibility.
Yeah, so T-BARTA, Tampa Bay actually had what we call the school pool program. And unfortunately, we are not funded for that. Funding was removed, I believe, in June 2021. We started winding the program down, and I know that there is a call for that. So I constantly ask our representatives if it's possible to bring something like that back. But we don't have the funding for it at the moment.
So FDOT gives T-BARTA funding for different segments of the Vanpool community.
Just to clarify, the Vanpool program they would qualify for it. It's just a little bit harder based on the number. So typically the administrative side, so there are who we've had conversations with because they have a higher number of employees on site. But when it comes to staffing teachers, the schedule, the shift doesn't always work. Sometimes they have to stay a little bit later, or it could be a lower number. So when we collect a database, it doesn't indicate large enough pools to be able to form a Vanpool. This is why carpool was the route to go. But they would certainly qualify for the Vanpool program. We just haven't been able to put a group together large enough.
I should qualify something here. School pool is designed to reduce traffic around schools. So you have these schools that have massive traffic jams in front of them. Folks coming in and dropping their children off. And the idea behind school pool is to share that responsibility between families. So one family is taking a group of children or I should say, one driver is taking a group of children and dropping them off at school. It's that particular program that we no longer have funding for.
So it's not somebody driving away from Pasco County, it's a group of parents cooperating to.
That's correct. And there was a separate website that we had for that. The idea is not to mix carpool information from the general public, people that are commuting to work, with families that are trying to get their children to school. We'd like to keep those two databases separate.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Sure. Any other questions? All right. Well, thanks again. Appreciate it very much. Good report. The next item on our agenda is a communications update. Chris.
I'll just be brief with a couple notes in addition to what you have in your packet. Note that we had a really nice podcast from Brandon Campbell, the city of Tampa, once again on the MOS, Mobility as a Service program that they are just launching now. So I encourage you to listen to that if you have not already. We did do a paid LinkedIn campaign to promote Green Your Commute. It was a modest campaign. We had a couple $100 left over in some funding that was specific to promote commuter services. So I think, Ken, you did get a few leads on that. It did direct a few more HR professionals and business owners, which is where that campaign was targeted to that campaign. So we did try a little bit of that there. And following up on my information before about our event at the Tampa Lighthouse, the stations that attended today were WTSP Channel 10, WFTS Channel 28, and Bay News 9. We're all there providing some coverage. I've seen a web page, a story from Channel 10 already, and I think there'll be some other coverage on their newscast later tonight. That's my report. Thank you.
Good. Thank you, Chris. Ryan, is there anything you want to add on committee vacancies?
Sure. At the next board meeting, which by the way is now scheduled for Friday, May 27th, so it's been pushed back a week. We have an action item to approve Mr. Clinton Wynn as the Pasco MPO rep to the CAC. Once he is approved, that will bring our total membership to 15. So we would have 3 vacancies remaining. An at-large member, which has to be chosen by a gubernatorial appointee and whose seat is vacant, the Manatee County rep, and the Hart representative.
Any progress on the Manatee County?
I reached out to Dave Hutchinson. He's the Sarasota Manatee MPO director. I reached out to him again, I think just yesterday, to see if there's anyone on his CAC that might be interested in serving as the Manatee County rep. I have not heard back from him yet, but I will follow up.
Okay. Good.
Or you said Manatee, but you also mentioned Sarasota, but do they have to be in Manatee for that one?
For this, yes, because the vacancy is for the Manatee County, not the MPO. So the person has to be from Manatee County. I reached out to the MPO just because I'm trying to reach out to organizations that might know of someone that would be interested. And I thought, well, maybe someone that's on their CAC who is from Manatee might also be interested in serving on ours.
Thank you. Yeah, because the only people I know in Sarasota that I was reached out to for that vacancy, that they all live in Sarasota, not Manatee. So
yeah, so this person would have to be a Manatee County resident.
Thank you.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, Sarah Calhoun has her hand raised. She's joining by Zoom.
Yes. Sarah, go ahead.
I just wanted to remind you all that I am from the Sarasota Manatee CAC, MPO CAC, and that I am a Manatee County resident already. So I don't know that helps because we're looking for another representative, but that's who I represent.
Right.
But Sarah, the thing I need to clarify is you are the Sarasota Manatee MPO rep. So we have an MPO rep, but we also have a county rep. So.
Right.
And we're glad you're with us. So.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
I guess the question would be, maybe this is a question to Brian, is if we found another Sarasota Manatee MPO rep, would Sarah qualify, should Commissioner Bellamy agree to make her the Manatee County? Is that a?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's like, and basically what I think what you're suggesting is doing a swap.
I would be, that's Commissioner.
I
Bellamy's
I
call.
think that's something we could entertain.
Good.
I just wanted to ask that the Tivata board meeting is going to be here again.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
That's on the 27th.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Brian. Appreciate it. You want to move into the CSX corridor study update?
Sure. I'm working with Al Burns. He's the Director of Procurement here at PSTA on doing the procurement for the CSX corridor study. We are shooting to have a request for proposals for the study posted in mid-June with a goal of awarding a contract at the August board meeting. TBARTA is going to use the information and recommendations from this study to see if there's regional consensus on a passenger rail project. To that end, TBARTA, what we want to find out from this study is four things. One, how much will it cost to upgrade the Brooksville and Clearwater subdivisions to passenger rail standards? Two, what is the recommended passenger rail project? Three, what are the upfront capital costs required to implement the project? And four, how much will it cost annually to operate and maintain passenger rail service? So the study is going to have three main tasks. Task one will be a corridor assessment. So an assessment of the physical condition of the tracks, the identification of all the necessary upgrades that would be needed to accommodate passenger rail service. That's task one. Task two is the concept of operations. That includes identifying the appropriate transit technologies, recommended number of stations along with their general locations, and a recommended span and frequency of service. That's task two. And then finally, task three would be case studies. Specifically, these will be case studies from around the nation of negotiations between state and local government agencies and private freight rail operators for the use of the latter's tracks for passenger rail service. So like I said, the goal is we're hoping to get a contract awarded for that study at the August board meeting.
Right. Is that study going to focus solely on the Brooksville to Tampa leg?
The Brooksville and the Clearwater subdivisions, those two.
Okay. Okay. Questions from the committee about that study, Josh?
Yeah, when it comes to the second task, and the stations and the spacing and all that for the route, how detailed will the station analysis be? Is it going to be broad areas, as in, we know we want a station at the airport, or?
Yeah, I don't think it'll be getting down to the parcel level, like it's this specific property we want, but I mean, I would think similar to kind of like what we're doing with the RRT study, where we know, the general locations of where the stations are going to be. And the reason why it is, the counties, in particular Hillsborough County, has expressed an interest in approaching CSX about the use of their corridor. And CSX's always response has been, well, what's the project? And so we want this study to have enough information to be able to go to CSX saying, this is what we're proposing on doing. Like I said, this is the feasibility study. I mean, once we get done this study, and if we approach CSX with FDOT's help, and it looks like this is something that could happen, there's still going to have to be subsequent work done, like a project development and environmental study.
Okay, thank you. And can you just refresh my memory? What's the Brooksville and Clearwater subdivisions?
Yeah, I wish I had basically, so the Clearwater subdivision goes from downtown St. Pete, like going northwest up the county to Clearwater, and then across the Hillsborough County, I think roughly parallel with Bush Boulevard. The Brooksville subdivision goes from downtown Tampa, basically up to Brooksville.
So is that different? Is the Clearwater subdivision different than the green light, original green light corridor that kind of?
Does it go to St. Pete?
It does, but they closed most of it in St. Petersburg.
Green Light had it going up and across East Bay.
Right, that's where it is. Yeah, it's the Clearwater line coming out of Oldsmar.
Yeah, so that's what I was gonna ask.
Yeah.
It's the one that goes across Oldsmar and then
Yeah.
gets to the airport eventually and kind of meanders around Bush and all
Yeah,
that.
if you want, I have maps of both subdivisions. I'd be happy to email them. I can email them to the entire committee if that's the committee's desire.
Yeah, just curious.
Just so that we're all on the same.
But that's the route. It goes across Oldsmar, it goes across the top of the bay, along Bush Boulevard and makes the connection around the Florida, Nebraska area. Yeah.
Got it, thank you.
Okay, good. Thank you, Brian. All right. Any other new business to come before the committee? Or anything that you specifically want us to report to the board? Yes, Josh?
I just have one question for staff. Is TBARTA doing anything for National Bike Month? May is National Bike Month. I know Hillsborough County is doing a lot of events. City of Tampa is doing a lot of events. I'm sure Pinellas, St. Pete are as well. So just curious if we're partnering on any of those or holding our own events or anything like that. Just curious.
Just completed, Florida has kind of a Love to Ride bicycle challenge in the month of March. I know that there was a lot of events that were sponsored by the city of Tampa, city of St. Pete. Forward Pinellas had group bike rides. I think that really is kind of consolidating into Florida Bike Month. And we haven't been participating in the national Bike Month. That would love to have something come up that where we could do this. But for instance, the state of Colorado, where just 2 years ago, I was running operations out of Denver. Bike to Work Day is actually the last Wednesday of the month of June. And it's all over the place nationally. It all depends on kind of the local conditions. We will be having Mobility Month coming up. That's in the month of November. Lots of events that are scheduled across the state for that particular event. But yeah, no, we don't really have anything with national or Bike Month in May.
Then just curious, are the events that, for example, I know like City of Tampa and Karen Cressler and Downtown Partnership are hosting some ride to work type of events. Is that something that TBARTA typically amplifies on social media and shares and gets attention towards, or not?
We haven't been as good as I'd like to be on that, amplifying what people are doing. Moving forward, that's something that definitely we want to make sure that everybody in our circle knows that these events are going on. But we haven't been as good as we should be on that.
We do include some memories, so I try to do that as well.
Okay, thank you, Josh. Any other questions? Any specific items that you would like us to bring before the TBARTA board at their next meeting? I'll give our committee report, of course. We do not meet again until July, so make note not to come here in June. And we will be back. That date is in your agenda. And of course, you're always encouraged to attend the TBARTA board meetings if you'd like to do that, either virtually or is it going to be virtual available, Brian? For the board meeting?
We generally are doing hybrid meetings, we will. Obviously, physical form, but same setup will have the Zoom capability, so you report that way.
Be held in this room. Okay, good. Well, if there's no further business, I want to thank those of you who made the trip and joined us here in person. Thank you, those who are online also for participating. And with that, the meeting is adjourned.